technology, you've got better bins, better aeration, everything's better. Why did we lose more corn? And when I say lose corn, I don't necessarily mean it turned black and you put it in a ditch. I mean that you lost value. So one of the things my intention is going to be, the balance of my career, is going to be to try to get this message across and make it plain that it will pay you to do the right thing. So a lot of things we're going to talk about today are going to be involved in that type of thing. Subjects, why dry grain? And there's the physics, the reality, and then you also have the early harvest story, which we'll go through pretty quickly, but we will go through. Aeration in large bins. We talked a little bit about this earlier. What is aeration? Holding grain over 15%, which if I can stomp that out, I'll stomp that out sometime in the next 10 years, because this is the biggest threat you guys have. How the storage has changed, and then storage tips if we have time. Those are pretty readily available elsewhere, so we'll go through those if we get to that point. I do want to cover a couple of issues that are a little bit different before we get into the main part, and one of them is the moisture testers. Who here has either a Purton 5200 or a GAC 2500? Well, then none of you, you're the only one that has a tester that's accurate within a half point. The rest of their testers are not accurate to within a point. That's something that's very important to know and understand. What's happened is, remember the old blue silos, the old Tomcos, that everybody wanted to have one, but the 990 was so expensive that only the elevators had them? Those testers for 30-some years were accurate to within 0.1%. And it wasn't because they were that good. It was because the grain was so consistent. There was very little difference in density, very little difference in variation in corn. Genetics had not really exploded at that point. So in a very consistent situation, you can really hone those down. When the GAC 2100 came in years ago, we replaced it, is because the Tomco had gotten more than a half point off. So it was never better than 3/10. The best the GAC 2100 ever was, which was the USDA standby, it's what you had to have if you wanted to take corn in and pay money for it, was never better than 3/10. And that was because of the variation and the differences in the grain itself. The 2100, that 2500 was brought out, and the Purton 5200 were brought out in order to take and try to get back to that 3/10, because the 2100 had got to where it was up to a point off. So the guy that designed that tester right there has worked for us the last 4 years. And we're trying to figure out a way to make a grain jar be accurate on moisture, and it's extraordinarily difficult because of the variations you see. But when I ask him, get in his face and ask him, what would you guarantee that to be accuracy-wise, he squirms when you say, was it within 3/10. Just keep in mind that there's a big difference. And what happened was it had gotten so far off that the USDA actually went out and spent several $1 million to develop a new process, and then they gave it to any company willing to build a tester based on that technology. That's how these two testers came about. So they both built one, and it became the standard. And the reason is because the grains changed so much. You're looking at a situation where if you're a point off on the, and the thing is, it's the worst way. You got 25% corn, you want to dry to 15. In one of these, and they're not all off 1%, don't get me wrong, they're not all off that much. Some of them will be within 4, 5, 6 tenths, depending on your grain. And if you calibrate the local elevator, you may be a little closer. But if you're drying what a real tester, there's only one real tester, it's an oven and the scales. Anything else there's an indicator, and I challenge you to go look at those two, go home and look at your tester manual. You call it a tester, they don't. The word tester will not be in that manual, it will be indicator every time. Because all it's doing is measuring electrical capacitance and assuming a moisture. So it's never perfectly accurate. So that's the issue that you're into with this. But if you think you're drying from 24 to 14%, or excuse me, if you dry from 24 to 14%, that's taking up 10 points, you're going to produce 10% less capacity than 25 to 15, because the drier grain gets, like squeezing a towel with water, the drier gets, the harder it is to take moisture out. More BTUs it takes per pound of water. So you thought you were drying from 24 to 14, excuse me, you thought you were driving 25 to 15, but the tester was actually off a point and it was taking it down to 14, you just lost 10% of your capacity. You also lost water you could have sold. So there's a tremendous issue here with this. If you think you're going from 25 to 15, your tester, the moisture actually, because it's off the opposite, these testers are off up to a point high on the wet side and a point low on the dry side. So they're off both directions, opposite each other. Moisture, electrical capacitance of grain has a curve. It's not a straight line, it's a curve. And they're off on both ends. You theoretically could be in a case where you're reading, I'm driving from 25 to 15, you're really driving from 26 to 14. Now, that's 25% more energy. That's 25% less capacity. So we started seeing this, took us a couple of years to identify what was going on. It really took iron and load before we really understood what was going on. But this is an issue, and there's really only one thing to do about it, and the local elevator, whoever you deliver your corn to, is God. Their tester is all the one that counts. Whether they're right, they're wrong, or whatever, their tester is the only one that counts. And you need to calibrate your system to that tester. It's a pretty critical, pretty important thing right now. But the biggest thing from this to remember is there's only one real tester, it's an oven and scales. Anything else, an indicator, they're all off. Across the whole width of moisture, they're all off. And they're off differently from one end to the other. So just keep that in mind as you look at this stuff and think about how this works. How that affects storage. Using an older tester means grain dryer is drier than you think. All of today's discussion is going to be based on accurate moisture. So when I say something about 15, that's 15 in an oven scale. It's not 15 in a tester, it's off a point. So it's critical to remember that. Moisture is a critical component of safely storing grain. Again, the tester, where you deliver the grain, both calibrated on both the wet and the dry to find out where you are with your tester. Guys, once you've calibrated, all the testers are fairly good. They're pretty consistent. They may not be right, but they're pretty consistent. So you know your tester is off 3/10 on the wet end, one direction, and it's off 4/10 on the dry end, and you always subtract that. Your tester is perfectly adequate. It's not like you all need to go out and run GAC 2500s tomorrow, because it's not necessarily so. It makes it easier because it's going to be closer. But the elevator is the only one that really is the one that counts. The rest of them don't. One more comment about this. I thought it was still in there. The other thing is guys thinking they can store grain at 16% and not see a negative outcome from that. Probably the biggest reason over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years that guys have been able to do that is because the grain wasn't 16%. Their tester was off and it was really 15. So if you're using a tester that's off and you're putting what you think is 15% in the bin, or 16% is 15, you'll get away with it. Better than you would if it wasn't that way. But if you buy a new tester, you buy a 2500, more accurate, don't think you can do what you did before, because the moisture won't be the same. What you thought was 16, when the 2500 says 16, it means they're a whole lot closer to 16, not 15. So everything changes once you make that switch. Change the acceptable moisture. Part of what's going on with this grain not getting dried correctly, and that's all part of this wide dry grain story, is that our reputations overseas has went through the floor. 25, 30 years ago, the U.S. had the absolute best reputation for grain quality and storage length. If you wanted to buy corn, you bought it from the U.S. Everybody bought all their corn they could find from the U.S. And then if they couldn't get any more, they went to other people, because the other people's corn was crap compared to the U.S. You could buy number 3 corn from the U.S. and we deliver you number 1. That is no more. Today, if you buy number 1, about 30% of it gets rejected or discounted because it's not number 2 or not number 3. And all of this has to do with the fact that we're using up all the storable life when we harvest it. Some your fault, some not your fault. And then when it gets somewhere else, it's in trouble. This is why you saw the change in ADM, and this is not universal either. Some places they'll pay you to bring it at 14.5, some places they won't. But you can't put grain on a barge today that's going to do anything but go where it's going to go and get used, that it has to be 14.5%. And there's discussions about by next January 1st, this may be 14%. So they simply can't get the grain where they want to go. On the West Coast today, if you take one of the guys putting the grain on ships, if you can't document, as a commercial elevator, whoever selling to those guys, if you can't document that grain was 14% when it was harvested last fall, they won't put it on a boat. Because today it won't make it to Korea or Japan or Russia. It won't make it. It won't be acceptable when it gets there. Now, 25 years ago, it would still been #1 corn. We're going to talk a little bit about why that has happened, what's causing that to be a problem. Of course, drying to 14.5% will reduce dryer capacity. But if your grain stores well and you don't lose any of it, and you don't lose any test weight, which is the first step, you lose test weight, then it starts smelling, then it starts going bad. It's in that order. And those are just contact points that you can go look at what actually happened. Get to the next point is why dry grain, and there's several steps or reasons for it. First one is just pure physics, and just keep in mind, this is physics, and you will have people that get in front of you in meetings like this who will tell you things that, to be blunt, is BS. They're telling you what you want to hear. If you go to the universities, if you go to the USDA, if you go to anybody who's been doing this for a long period of time, we all agree on what you can and what you can't do. And it's never changed. Guys that come in and say, oh, throw a fan on it and run air all year, and you can store it 17% and you'll never have a problem and so forth. That's fine. They don't work for a company that can be sued. They're private individuals almost in every case that if you did sue them, if you had a big loss following what they said to do and you had a loss, you sued them, you get about $12,000. Because that's probably all they own. You've got to be really careful about what some so-called expert, including me. I don't care who it is that comes in front of you. I've got 40 years of experience. You still need to be checking at other places and verifying whether that information is accurate or whether it's not. Because when I was a kid, I remember this, a guy put up a 30-foot 7-ring bin, and we all gathered around as he built it because we couldn't believe how big it was. There must have been 7 people that day said, my God, you'll never fill this thing. 30-foot 7. You guys won't even want a 30-foot 7. That's how much it's changed. So all these things, the risk that you're taking is not only, I mean, it may only be $3.75, $3.50 today, but it's a whole lot more than, in 1977, I drove through Iowa, it was $1.04. And that year, it hit like $1.85. So it's a lot different than it was then, and you got a lot more of it. So the risk position is a lot higher. How much water is there in corn? This is one thing that usually surprises people if they haven't looked at it before. 26% down to 15% is 8.32 pounds of water that has to come out of that grain in order to take it from 26% down to 15%. Now it just so happens that water weighs 8.34 pounds per gallon. So when you're taking out 10 points, you take a dryer that's rating at 10 points. It's not unusual today to see 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 bushel an hour. For every bushel per hour that dryer is rated at 10 points, it takes out a gallon of water. So it's 1,000 bushel an hour dryer at 10 points, it takes out 1,000 gallons of water, evaporates it, and has to carry off every hour. This is the #1 reason why you better be careful how you put in your dryer. Don't face your fans to the north or the east, where the prevailing winds will bring the water back around and make it run around and around and kill your capacity. Make sure it's into the prevailing winds. Don't close it into a small space. Keep it as open as you can. We're working on my drain systems here. But keep it as open as you can because there's a tremendous amount of water that's coming out of that dryer. Trick question. I'll tell you it's a trick question before I ask it. Okay, we got a dryer that's 1,000 bushel an hour taking out 10 points. How many gallons of water is it removing when you're taking out 5 points? You can't answer. You can't answer. 1,000 gallons. Now why is that? Because it's physics. You put in a certain amount of air, a certain amount of BTUs, it's got a certain amount of water carrying capability. It don't care what the moisture of the corn is, it's going to carry 1,000 gallons of water off, as long as that grain is not hard dry. Now, that's assuming that the grain is normal BTUs per pound of water removal. That can get different, and some corn dries a lot harder. Most of you probably are experienced your dryers you've had for 8 years, and all of a sudden, certain varieties, it goes up and down. Only thing that changes is you run more bushels. What's a dryer that runs 1,000 bushels and there are 10 points rated at 5 points? It's rated 1,650 something. You can calculate those differences on the fact that it's going to take 1,000 gallons of water out. So, same amount of water comes out, it just takes and runs more bushels. But this is your whole situation in terms of what's happening around that dryer and why it is critical on how it's installed and how it's laid out to make sure that it's working at optimum performance. Maximum allowable storage time in days. How many of you have seen this chart before? If you haven't, I've taken this and I've compiled. This chart goes back so far that we don't really know when it started. We know it was prior to the 1930s. They did the testing, they did the analysis, they come up with the chart, and they knew approximately how long grain would store. In the 50s, it was improved some and expanded in terms of temperatures. And lately, a few guys have increased the upper temperatures, and I've compiled several of them together to get that widespread in temperature, because when you were kids, a lot of you here, at least when I was a kid, and I got to start saying that anymore, we didn't harvest at 80 degrees. We harvested at 50 or below. And that's going to be a really big factor in something we'll talk about here in a little while. But what this is, you need to read the fine print. Allowable storage time for clean, undamaged shell corn at various temperatures and moisture levels before a 0.5%, this is a minimum of a 0.5% loss in dry matter occurs. Now, dry matter is test weight. You don't see this. Totally invisible to you. It's just gone. You got to keep that in mind. It's anaerobic and aerobic respiration going on in the corn, and it's the same thing back to physics, conservation of energy. If you've got an anaerobic process or an aerobic process going on, it takes energy. Whereas get that energy, it takes out starch and grain. So you've got losses that are going on. A little different than invisible loss, but a similar concept. Off odors can be observed maybe a little earlier. The later work has been done to show that the odors may come after the test weight loss. Actual storage time, maybe half of this. We're going to talk about that. But the reason those are green is because those are at least coming close to a year. At least they're coming close to a year. Note one thing is missing. Usually I ask that question, but no one ever knows. So, but it's got temperature and it's got moisture. What is not up there? Amount of airflow. That's because aeration airflow has absolutely no effect on the storable life of grain. Zero. You can bring your temperature down quick and make it store longer or store easier that way, but the actual existence of airflow past that grain will not make it store 1 hour longer. Whether it's a 10 or it's a CFM, it will not make dry grain at a certain temperature store 1 hour longer. It has nothing to do with this. And this is where people are coming in and saying, we're going to pump your air and go big air on this 60-foot bin, and we're going to make this grain store longer to higher moisture. It isn't physics. It is not physics, and it has nothing to do with it. And the guys that try it are the ones I get to call in the fall, early spring, and I'm getting them right now. The grains went completely south, and they want me to provide some miracle to make it go back yellow. It doesn't happen. But those are, look at this. When I was a kid, Dad bought farm 64, first harvest. We probably averaged somewhere in between those two numbers. And we dried all of our grain down to 13 because we didn't have had no aeration at all. We knew that we were just going to sit there at the temperature it was at. We could not really change the temperature of the grain because we didn't have aeration. The reason you dried or really dry on a flat storage with no aeration is because you can't change temperature. So whatever temperature you harvested it, that's how long you got. So we tried to stay within those two periods because 14 and 13 guaranteed you didn't lose anything. I don't know if I've got whether I've got it in here or not. I don't think I do. Who's heard of free and bound water? There's free water and bound water. Why do we say that you should store at 15%? It used to be 13%. Recommendations 50 years ago was store grain at 13%. Why is that? Was that just magic? Someone pulled that number out of the air? No, that's not what happened. Starch binds water molecularly. The molecules of starch will bind that water. It's called bound water. I learned a whole lot more about this when Dan Lowe went to work for us because he lives and breathes by bound and free water. It affects your moisture indicators tremendously. So it's something you have to be always aware of. At 13%, there is no free water. Now, can you supply a lot of heat to it? By the way, this is also why it takes more energy to dry grain below 15. Is because it's bound. Although all you're taking out below 13 is bound. So what happens here is at 13%, look at the number of days we've got. You know, could have got away with 14, but the recommendations of 13 because you knew you had no problems. You could leave that grain. We used to store grain for 3 and 4 and 5 years. We used to put grain in the old government stores. How many remembers the 18-foot government bins? Those bins used to go 6 years before they were empty. And the reason they could do that is they were right here. They were down in this 13% level, and even at 80 degrees, they would go past a year, and that grain wouldn't change temperature a lot. So it was, you were able to do it. You can't now. Today, you guys are harvesting above 80, and where do we wind up on this is just the same chart. If we're trying to store grain at 16%, and it's 80 degrees outside, you've got 47 days, or you've lost 1 grade. You're no longer shipping number 1, you're shipping number 2, or number 3, if you started at number 2. So in 47 days, how many here thinks, even with aeration, you can get your grain, the first grain you harvest, how many here thinks that you can get that down below 80 degrees in 47 days? I bet you can. You'll have a chance if you got one of the new systems that monitors the outside temperature in the air and they automatically turn the fans on when they're supposed to come on. You've got at least a shot at it, but you probably can't. So down here it's extraordinarily difficult. By the way, in the south, it's even worse. Those poor boys down there, they know they're going to lose 1% in dry matter. That's just a given. So they harvest it, they store it as quickly as they can, they ship it up north. And by the way, they're the first ones to harvest, so they can usually do that. Last year they couldn't. It hurt them. They ship it all up north except for, or they ship it all up north and they hope it's gone within 2 months. I used to always wonder, if the South is raising more corn, why are we still hauling so much corn down south later in the summer? It's because they know they can't store it that long. They can only store it 2 or 3 months, they ship it up north, we use it, and they buy our corn up here in the refrigerator. They can't get down to 40 degrees, 30 degrees like we can, so they let us store it, and they haul it down south, they know they're going to have good grain. They can't store their own grain that long. Now I'm going to throw a hook into this. All those numbers we just used was clean grain. So we're going to go based on that. I've tried every way I can think of to explain this. I hope I don't put all of you to sleep, but I'm trying to get across what happens here, and it's extremely difficult just talking. So I'm going to try to give you an example of what actually happens if you're trying to store 16% grain. You harvest 16% grain September 15th. On October 13th, 28 days at 80 degrees, and it could be hotter than that, but it's probably no cooler than 80, you're down to 47 days. 41% of the life, storable life of that grain that an animal will eat it, or excuse me, that it will lose 1 grade, is 41% of its life. Now remember, that doesn't mean an animal won't eat it, it just means you lost money. Animals still eat it. Not as much of it. His production, he won't grow as fast as he did before. But he'll eat it. He'll even after the second set of these, he'll still eat it. But sometime in the third set, he's probably going to quit eating. So now we go to November 3rd, and these numbers are all real ballparky. So let's say we're down into the 60s by November 3rd, and this is average. It could be 50, it could be 55, but it's probably between 55 and 65. That now we're down to 151 days, so now we're down to 27% of the storable life. You understand what's going on here? You can't cool that grain down to 30 degrees and then get that big number you saw on that chart. That life is gone. If you dry the grain at that point, or if you cool the grain at that point, you don't gain that percentage that you lost back. It's gone. It's never coming back. November 24th, 21 days later, we should be at 50 on average. That gives 50 normally will give you 339 days of storeable life, but you've already lost so much. Now we're down to 21% of the storeable life that it originally had. Final temp at 40. You finally got it down to 40. You might get it lower. You might do better than these numbers, but there's 160 days left. So, loss of 1 grade is going to occur on May 2nd. 0.5% minimum you've lost. You never get it back. 15% corn at the same temperature and the same breaks, I've got 371 days left. I don't have a complete loss of 1 grade until November 30th of 2016. Do you understand why we tell you to dry to 15%? This is the difference. Now, if you always market your grain early, that's fine. But we're finding out that today we're keeping the grain longer. But look at the difference between the two. How much time's left? When did you lose more money than it cost you to dry that point out? And that's going to be the real point of this whole thing. Now I'm going to throw a rock in the works. Remember what that chart said? It said clean corn. And these studies that go clear back into the 50s. And if you didn't clean it, if you went straight from the combine through the dryer and into the bin, you've got half those number of days. Half the number of days. So now we go into that same chart, harvest at the same time. You guys down here have lost 1 grade. If it's straight run into the bin, you've lost 0.5% dry matter by that first cutoff point on October 13th. It's sitting at such a warm temperature for long enough, you've lost a grade. Now this, you may not have done that quite, this may be a little bit, but I can tell you, I can show you worse scenarios. This is about the middle scenario. You may do better, you may not. You never are going to know that. There's nothing that'll point that out to you. There's not enough of the smell. You're not like an elevator. Elevators know this. At least they used to know it. I'm finding today that they've forgotten it. But when I graduated college, if you went to work for an elevator, which several of my friends did, you got to the management position, you were judged on how much weight you sold. You brought in X number of pounds of corn, and then you were judged on shrink. That bin had 200,000 bushel put into it. They know it's going to have some shrink. You shrink too much, you're fired. You'll probably never work in the elevator system again. That was the #1 way those guys were, and that's why they spent so much time worrying about moisture and where the bins were, and they monitored them all the time. They did the proper procedures of storage because they knew they'd lose their job. I'm not sure today that's necessarily correct. So now we get to 21 days, 72% of the 2nd grade loss. At November 24th, we're down to 60%. We've got 213 days left, or on June 24th, we will have lost 2 grades. You always hear me talk about get your grain. If you're not going to you're going to try to not follow the rules, have that grain gone by June 1st. Now on June 1st, you're going to lose 2 grades, over 1%. So there's a loss, but it probably isn't black yet. Now woe for the elevator that receives it. He's probably got 30, 40 days before he's in deep trouble. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I can tell you, probably in my lifetime, assuming I live long enough. If I live as long as my dad, I think for sure this will happen. You'll see, you're going to have to keep records on what you did to your grain. I'm already helping an independent system in the government. They're demanding that they be able to monitor this stuff so that you sold grain to any elevator, you got to give them a history. What it was when you dried it, the information on how hot it was when it's dried, so forth and so on, how long has it been, what temperatures were it in the bin, or you're going to find a local source to sell it because you're not going to ship it anywhere. So that's coming. But at 375, and the reason, guys, is because they can't stand the losses. Probably the reason why our corn prices are down is because we ship less corn today overseas than we did 10 years ago, a lot less than 20 years ago, and a whole lot less than 30 years ago. Because we're not the #1 quality corn, we're somewhat high priced, and they're not buying it anymore. get down every morning and do a little prayer for ethanol. Because guys, if it wasn't for ethanol, we'd be below a buck again, a buck a bushel right ahead of it. If we raised the same number of bushels. Now that wouldn't happen. You guys would have been raising something else because corn wouldn't have been viable. But at 375 corn, 2 grades lost, dry matter 6 to 8 cents per bushel. It costs you between 1 cent and 2 cents in your dryer. Any late model, high efficiency dryer costs 1 to 2 cents a bushel to take it from 16 to 15. I hope you're getting my point. Everybody seems to think they saved money by doing this. I didn't buy that fuel. No, you didn't write a check. But there was an invisible check that took away from what you got when you took it to the elevator, and there's your loss. Difference between 1 to 2 cents and 6 to 8 cents, if that scenario is what happened. We're seeing a lot more cleaners being used today, part of the reasons for this reason. But the biggest issues is this: once it's past the 2nd grade loss, the odds of catastrophic losses are way higher. 10, 15 times more likely to have a catastrophic loss. That means half the bin's black, and you're throwing the ditch. So these things are something you've got to be aware of. And I didn't used to talk about this very much. I knew it, but I didn't talk about it very much because hardly anybody was losing grain in the 80s and the 90s. We were still following most of the rules. Today we're not following the rules. I'm getting a lot of phone calls. Last 3 studies are from 60 years of research, but they're averages and estimates. So keep in mind, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen to you. I got to give like the guy that tries to sell you bonds or whatever. Those numbers aren't necessarily real. I can give you individuals where those numbers come from because they have records. They've kept records through their, in most of the cases they're using Intellier systems, and they have records of what the grain temperature was through the fall. So that's where I got that information from. Won't necessarily be yours, but at least it's pretty consistent. Main thing to realize, there is a cost of trying to hold grain over 15%. The cost is always higher than the savings in fuel. You're gaining nothing. You're gaining nothing. A little more capacity. You're saving a little bit of LP fuel, but you're paying for it. Elevator shrink. Most of you are fairly aware of this. The only real points here is that they're going to shrink you 13 to 15%, and there are real reasons for this. Don't think that the elevator is doing this to you just because they can. They probably can, but that's not the reason they're doing it. They provide all kinds of services for you in terms of local grain prices, write contracts for you, and very seldom they charge for it. That income's got to come from somewhere. They also have losses. Elevators are big bins. It's difficult to store grain, particularly when it's coming in and it was put in the bin at 16%. Might be 15 now in June, because when the respiration loss builds heat, you take a little moisture out of it. So it might be down to 15 when you deliver it, but they've only got 30 days to market it, they lose some of it. So the shrink is to cover their mechanical losses and their other losses, and it's pretty well real. But if you dry it to the right moisture and you store it correctly, you don't have that, and you're looking at about an 11.8% shrink at 10 points. Well, 10 points, the difference is 1.5 to 3.2% of gross income. So here's part of what helps pay for the dryer. This is part of the ROI that helps pay for the dryer, the difference in shrink that you get to sell the bushels. If you store it correctly, you had that return, 6 to 8 cents. Now you've got another set of return, but all of it requires good management in order to see that. 375, that's 4.5 to 12 cents per bushel, straight out. Now, Illinois has a lot better elevator system than Indiana or Kentucky has, in my estimation, simply because they're almost all co-ops. They don't charge as much for the drying. They don't shrink as much. They tend to be closer to that 13% shrink pretty consistently. Other areas, particularly as we go south, that number is usually closer to 15 because the losses are higher. If you can get it down dry and get it cool, you can get away from those. So that's part of the returns that you can get. What are the realities? Why dry grain? Well, it's pretty simple. You can't harvest it all at 15% unless you're down here and you're willing to wait long enough, and I'm going to show you why you can't afford to do that either. Robin's smiling back there, I think I know why. To increase income through early harvest, because there is an income from doing this, and it's 60-some years of data that backs this up. For convenience, no elevator lines, you're harvesting early in good weather, you eliminate harvest bottlenecks. And in the past, that's been the #1 reason guys that put dryers in storage in. They just couldn't stand to sit in line. I'm the worst of the worst. I hate standing in lines. So that was probably the biggest motivator, even though it doesn't have a lot to do with the money coming back. I'm going to show you why it's still a good idea. Capture the elevator shrinkage charges, and with bins, capture the basis, spread and carry, which you're going to hear more about later today. The early harvest story is pretty simple. The goals of it is to avoid weather-related and invisible field losses, which can be at least partially reduced. Reduce the losses in head shatter loss from harvesting grain below 20%. 1980, fuel is actually quite a bit less, half of what it was when I hit the road in 1978, 7. About the average LP at that time was about $1.75. Now it had been lower previous, but from the 70s on, it's pretty much been in the same gas range, going up and down. What did you guys buy fuel for this year, LP? For your dryer? Just a rough number, right?
99 cents.
Okay, we used to figure $1.50 3 or 4 years ago. That's pretty close. Today we figure $1. We've had 30 reports come back as we go around and look. Wind farmers bought LP gas last fall for 75 cents a gallon. It's the cheapest it's been since I started this business in 1977. So it's less today than it was then. Today's GSI dryers use half the fuel. When I talked about dryers when I first got out in the field, I told you you're going to get 4 to 5 bushel a gallon fuel, taking out 10 points. I hate talking about LP gas because the cost is varied. So the easier way would say that if you're taking out 10 points, which by the way back then was about the average, then you didn't start till November, so and it didn't get dry. Technology has changed, but I used to say that they would take dry 4 to 5 bushel gallons. Some of them dry 3.5. The old 600 MCs, the old CMS farm fans, they dry 3 to 4 bushel a gallon if you don't take it out 10 points. Today, through university tests and independent testing, we're always in the 8 to 9 range, and that's probably going to go down a little bit with some equipment that we've been experimenting with there recently. But we're basically at half the fuel, half the BTUs required in order to dry the grain. Some of that kind of went away because the grain's drying harder, but otherwise it's still there. Corn was about $2 then, and that's given it, a little bit of help. Today it says $3.75. I did some checking before I wrote this 2 days ago, and it's in that range. Depends on whether you store it. If you store it and you play the games that you can play and capturing, and you're going to hear again more about that this afternoon. This can be a lot higher than this. Never going to see 450, but it can be higher than this. But if it's the difference was corn's worth a lot more. So what we've always known, Midwest data indicates combine losses are at their lowest at 26%. They start to creep back up above that. And there's generally about a 1 to 3% losses were typical across all the years. The older combines are worse than the new ones. Combine losses increase as grain dries. Losses of 10 to 15% are common, with corn at 15%. You guys, I was one of the guys who worked for the ag-economic guys at Purdue who was on his knees taking the width of the corn head and 3 foot it and scraping it down to bare ground and then raking it to get every kernel. So these aren't estimates, these are actual measured numbers we're going to be talking about here for losses. They are the minimum number. University of Kentucky reran a lot of these studies and reran a lot of this data gathering here 3 or 4 years ago, and it changed a little, but I'll explain to you what changed. Those losses occur because of the ear snapping off the stalk, falling on the ground, as well as shelling the corn and the header. The trouble with combines is the corn shells off the ear below the header, and you cover it up with debris. And you never see it until it sprouts. We're going to talk about that. And this information here is from Mississippi State University. Basically, most of the work that's been done of late has been done by the Southern University because it's new to them. It's old stuff for us up here, and most of our guys that developed all this and did it are all retired, and there aren't very many people left that actually even know something about this. This is a accumulation, and this is by the University of Kentucky, and they went through the old field studies, new field studies, looking at, for machine losses, and invisible losses, and the different losses you can get. This is basically machine losses about 1% at 30%. It's still roughly the same. It's a little worse here than it is here, but it was not a full tenth off. And then it increases as the moisture goes down. The invisible losses, which is at 30%, we think of 30% as being mature, or black line being mature, but black line occurs somewhere, it's a wider range than 30%. But once it black lines, no energy really leaves or comes into the kernel, and but from that point on, it has to develop cotyledon. Cotyledon is not there. So the conservation of energy again, you're going to build this vegetative state, you're going to build this cotyledon in this seed. The energy's got to come from somewhere. That energy is what we call invisible loss. That first came out in the 90s, it was hauled in the 2000s. It's come back strong because it's real. There's a lot of documentation on what that is. That is fairly consistent once you get to 25%, but probably the biggest number I've ever seen is about 6%. You probably could figure maybe a hair below that, but this is pretty consistent, and there's a whole lot of studies that have covered that. The total losses, and by the way, this is not by no means the highest, this is the minimum losses that they found as they did the studies and looked at their numbers. The gentleman from the University of Kentucky was very, very careful because he didn't want to get in a position where someone come in and show data that showed he was misleading. So he was very, very careful with this. I had nothing to do with it. I completely agree with it. It's the same information that we come up with 15 years ago. But again, 375 invisible loss alone is 22 cents. You're not going to get all that. Probably the most you're ever going to capture is half. But it's there, and you can't capture some of it. Who's ever seen this? This is sprouting corn, various places. The 2 kernels per foot is a bushel per acre of loss. In Assumption, Illinois, it's always been a treat in the fall to watch the guys go out with disc or field cultivators. This happens. This is Assumption, Illinois. Talking about 275, 280 bushel corn. So what if there's a couple bushel on the ground? That ain't a couple bushel. Okay? They go out, they disc or field cultivate it, and a week later it's back. If it stays warm there, it stays wet. They go out, they disc or field cultivate it again, it comes back. Won't be that thick. But in some cases, it'll go from here to here with 3 discings. So there's a lot more there. And then the thing to remember, only about half of it sprouts. At best case. So whatever you see, it's double. And it don't take very many sprouts per square foot to start adding up to bushels. In the north, we don't see it. It's too cold, they don't sprout. We get to live in our la-la land. We didn't lose anything. And you'll very often hear guys from Minnesota say, my combine don't put a single kernel in there. I don't see any of that. Yeah, 30 degrees when you finish. And you plow in the spring for it, there's a chance coming up. You ain't gonna see any of it. That doesn't mean it's not there. This is not as complicated as it seems. I'm going to point out a couple of things. This is the recent farmer, this is university studies and literature reports of the actual losses from the combine, harvest losses, starting in at 32% and dropping down to 15%. I put this in here simply because 35, 40 years ago, the Ohio State University, over a 5-year period, did several thousand of these tests on individual farmers. And they documented them all and they come back. This is 1/2 that number. If you put that number where it really was, it would be up here at 16% going right across here. That's what it was 30 or 40 years ago, the losses. They were always higher. So there wasn't much you could do about it. That's where they were, and you weren't going to change them much. The reason I chose to put up half is because look what's happened. Look at how much better the combines have got, and the heads have got, since 30 years ago. Combines have gotten a whole lot better at saving this corn, but almost all this, the improvement has been above 22%. It is better here, better here, better here, but at 15%, the losses through the head and through the combine are the same as they were 30 years ago. So another reason why you don't want to see 15% going through your combine, and by all means you don't want to see 12 or 13 because, well, they said close your eyes, don't go look. You're harvesting 13%, don't go look. I don't want anybody committing suicide. or feeling bad for months and months and months, because you will. It'll shock you what's on the ground if you go look. But the whole point here is, these are the losses, those are the losses most recent. The green loss is a machine loss. The red is, remember the invisible losses were pretty consistent? Machine losses got higher and higher. You add them together, you come up with the purple line, and those are all from more recent information. It's a combination of the two places where those numbers come from. This is the important part. And just to make sure you know that I'm not playing games with you, this right here, this is $22 of drying cost, 22%. That's based on $1 a gallon fuel. And today we run at 10 points, you know, whatever moisture, basically we run pretty much $22 an acre. That's what we run in terms of taking out that moisture. It's a lot better than what it used to be. The numbers here, if you got 200 bushel corn, you multiply 200 bushel corn times 375, or 800 bucks, 16% of that is about $125. So this is not made up. These are the same numbers you saw before off the studies put on paper. The critical point here is, where do you see this green line is adding your drying costs together with your machine losses? Where does that number improve by waiting? 32% here. Where does it get better because of waiting? Well, done. It never does. In reality, if you just do all of it 32%, you can't, most combines don't handle it real well there and so forth. But look at it this way. If you average 17% on your harvest, there's your losses, about $85. But if you could have averaged 23%, there's your losses at $50. The difference is what you put in your pocket from early harvest. And it's real. I can't count how many of the really large farmers, guys farming 10, 15,000 acres, have done, they didn't believe me. They went and did their own field studies. They went and did their own numbers. They calculated and through, and the first thing they did is they start harvesting early. Probably the one that impressed me the most was, he's the nephew of Eugene Smith. And Eugene Smith was not someone who impressed me years ago. But Brent Smith, he went and did all these numbers, and he bought a second dryer because of what he saw in the field. But one thing he noticed that I was kind of surprised, he was at a point where he needed to go from 3 combines to 4. And what he found out is if I start, instead of starting at 25, if I start at 27 and a half, 28, I don't need the 4th combine. Because I got more days of harvest. So he was saving the cost of a combine, 2 trucks, and more importantly, 3 employees, which is getting more and more difficult to find. But there is a difference, and these numbers were based. We may not be this high, 200 bushel corn, 375, and you don't save all of that. I've had guys pull those numbers before. I've seen this happen, and they'll say, you save from $40 to $122 for early harvest. No, you don't. You're going to average somewhere in here. You can take your average and you get an idea. It's probably $20, $30, maybe $40 if you look at it real hard. But it's worth working at it to get it. The numbers. 1980, 98 bushel. Last year was 168 based on the USDA average, United States. The value of the bushel is $2, $3.75. Total value in the field. A lot of guys are a little bit surprised by that. The value that's in the field is a whole lot higher. At LP fuel cost at $1.50 in 1980 with their dryers, you used 18% of the value of the corn to dry the grain. Now think about that. It costs you 18% of the value to dry it. Your losses, it didn't gain you anything. Fuel was relatively expensive. Dryers used a whole lot of fuel. It didn't make sense to go out there. So it was different. Today, we're at 3.2%. At $1.50, we're at 4.8%. This is the difference in why when I first started the business, I didn't tell you to harvest early. I did not. Today, I'm telling you, the earlier you can start, the better off you'll be. Corn losses exceed 5% at 23% moisture. 3.2% at 26%. So these costs, everything piled together, you're virtually always better off harvesting. What's the point? Modern efficient grain dryer net income increase or decrease. That's not true. It increases. Then you got an increase, so you change that. Start at 30%, 2% moisture. Economics have changed since the 98 bushel acre average, $2 corn. And think about the other thing. You older guys here, think about the other thing. What do we all have? We had cattle and hogs. We had fences. And if we left 16% on the ground, so what? My dad, we always ran cattle out there. They claimed it for the most part. And if they didn't get it, the hogs did. So even if we lost it, it didn't matter. There was no economic driver to harvest grain earlier in 1970. Absolutely none. That's changed. With a 20% loss, 18% of the value didn't pencil out. Today, with a 3.2%, it does. Many farmers are harvesting earlier for more income and an efficient, high capacity dryer to make that possible. By the way, it still pencils out with the old dryers. You're still better on it. You make more with the new dryer, but an old dryer still makes you money. We're even seeing elevators. Elevators track the average moisture coming into the elevator. It's went up 2 points in the last 10 years. You ask them why. Some don't know. Some say, well, guys are realizing if they let it get all the way down to 15, they're seeing a lot of losses. And a lot of the guys going strictly to the elevator don't have a big farm. They're hiring a combine done. They may be able to harvest their entire farm from 18 to 16. And if they do, rather than waiting to get to 50, there's money there. So you're starting to see even the small guy starting to react to this. Some elevators are starting to talk about it. Paybacks, minimizes chance of harsh weather conditions. This we didn't talk about. You know, we talk about what you would get, but what if wind comes through? And the reels come out, and you lost 30, 40%. Big difference. It reduces dry matter losses, invisible, increased yields. Head shatter has good harvest days, so you can maybe get better use out of your combines and your equipment. Today it's going to be important that we keep our operating costs down. But it's harvesting warmer weather for less stress on people, but on the other side, it makes it harder to store the grain. So it makes it more critical that we have aeration and so forth. And it allows the catcher to really harvest pretty premiums from the grain merchandisers. We have an ROI tool that brings all this together. And Larry can do that for you. Our guys in the plant can do that for you. And they can show you what the differences are. This needs to be tweaked because this actually comes out lower than it actually is. In the last 3 or 4 years, it's changed. I don't have that video set up, so you're going to miss it. Well, my point was, this guy gets kicked, and he gets kicked bad. Thrown completely out of the shot. And the reason is because he removed that board right there. He didn't stay with the plan. That board was there for a reason. And if you don't plan, if you don't stick to the rules, you usually get hurt. Aeration in large bins. This is what we talked a little bit about earlier. A bin can be a dryer, it can be a cooler, an all-heat dryer, or it can be a storage device. And it takes different bins for each one of them. And there's limitations of what you can do. Drying air must be 1 CFM per bushel. It must be applied no more than 21 foot of grain. And that grain must be level, or that grain won't be moisture. It should not exceed 5 inches of static pressure. I'm going to show you why in a minute. If there's a burner involved, if there's no burner involved, you can go to 6 inches on the fan, but no burner works halfway well above 5 inches of static pressure. Again, we're back to physics. We can, a lot of companies like to think they can do things, but you got to stick with what can be done. Cooling air, whoops, button's sticking. Cooling air normally runs from 1/3 to 1 CFM per bushel, and it varies as to how fast you're filling the bin. And apply it no more than 45 foot heat level below the grain. There is a limit to how big a cooling bin you can have. You get too big, you can't cool the grain. You put grain into it too fast, you can't cool it fast enough, and you have losses. You take all those things we talked about earlier and just multiply them in terms of possibilities of having problems. So you can't get 1 CFM. Try it sometime. Have Larry bring up air pick and try to get a 1 CFM of air in a 48 foot, 13 wide bin. You can't do it. It's 400 some horsepower, and you're never going to get there. So you can't even get to that point, but you should not exceed 6 inches of static pressure. But let's think of it this way. At 6 inches of static pressure, there's a 4-degree temperature rise. That officially qualifies as a low temp dryer. That's a low temp dryer. It's going to move water in the bin, and that can be a bad thing. You also take in that grain you're putting in the bin, here are the rules you follow if you want to keep that grain good. If you're going to fill that bin, it's going to take you 4 days to fill it. You want to stay at 1/3 of the CFM, no less than when the bin's full. If you're gonna take 3 days to fill up 1/2, if it's 2 days, it's 3/4, if it's 1 day, you need 1 CFM. Most of you can fill up a 4813 in a day. You can't get 1 CFM. So you just left the world of all heat drying when you get to that point. You just really can't do it anymore. You need to be looking at a different process to get around that. Aeration air runs from 1/20 to 1/4 of the CFM per bushel. If you're above 1/4 CFM, you're no longer aerating your grain. You're trying to dry your grain. It may not be possible, but you're trying. We'll talk about why that is. And you should not rise above 4 inches to eliminate that moisture movement that drying occurs. So aeration is aeration. Why shouldn't I run high aeration rates in large bins? Aeration has one and only one thing that it does for you. And that it changes the temperature of the grain. It will not stay out of, you have to have 1 CFM of airflow before you can take and, that's weird. You have to have one CFM of airflow before you can take and try to help grain. And then, you didn't save it, you just stopped the heat. How many here stopped heating the grain and then stored it the rest of summer and delivered it? I bet none of you. Because once the heat started, a big fan blew the heat out. You're okay for now. 3 or 4 weeks later, it's back. Because you didn't actually stop the process, because air can't do that. It's not possible. The goal should be to prevent grain going out of condition, not saving it with aeration or trying to hold wet grain. It's not possible. Static pressure creates heat or pressurization. Any heat rise above 4 degrees changes the equilibrium point, so the water is moved from the bottom to the middle of the bin. Remember, 21 foot is your maximum grain depth. That's how far, at 1 CFM, water will move 21 feet and then it redeposits. If you're in a 30-foot E bin, all that water is going to redeposit the top 10 foot. This is a bad thing. You don't want to do that. So, you got to stay away if the temperature rises, and there's actually no reason to do it, and I'll show you why. We used to harvest at 50 degrees, now we're 70 to 90. We need aeration. We need it bad, particularly if we're going to try to store it at a high moisture rate like 15. Because 13 is where it's safe. 15, you're playing the edge. You don't have a full year. With aeration, airflow water moves, but it doesn't leave the bin. The grain that receives water goes out of condition, heating consumes dry matter. So, and not only that, those grades you lost earlier, now we're talking about more losses on top of the earlier losses. Loss of grain creates fines, and also, how do you put good grain in the bin and then, you even cord it? I know a few people do that. Oh, you should. You even cord it and everything, but then when you delivered it in June or July or August, you got all these fines. Where'd it come from? Right here. It'll actually bust that corn up in the bin as it degrades. Too much aeration air often is worse than not enough because you build static pressure. You may be able to run above a 1/4 CFM in the old 30-foot 7-ring bins because that took a 1.5 fan. It was easy. Can't do that in these bigger bins. Store the correct moisture for the storage period, aerate correctly. Here's why. Let's look at these big bins. And here's a 60-footer, and this is a 1/10 of a CFM. Static pressure is 1.79 inches. Fan horsepower is 10 horsepower. Temperature rise across that fan is 1 degree. So you really have an effect of the ability of that fan to cool that grain 1 day. Takes you 129 days, or hours, 5.4 days to cool that grain. Bring that front through. Now that may seem like a while, but going shorter really don't help you. As long as temperature don't change that fast. So that's a perfectly viable. By the way, the old standard in commercial was a 20. When I come into this business, no commercial elevator ran more than a 20. You didn't need to. As long as you practice all the principles, as long as you cord multiple times every 10 or 15 feet as you fill, as long as you pull it down to an M, move grain to other places, pull it down to an M, as long as you did all the things right, a 20 was more than enough. You didn't need anything more than that. They could even use partial floors and still do well. Because one, they didn't put 15% grain in, then they put 14. If they're going to store it long term, they put 14. So a lot of things comes together to make this look. Well, look what happens. Okay, now I'm going to go to a 7, but let's just jump to a 4. Everybody seems to want a 1/4 of a CFM bin or 60-foot bin. Well, to get a 1/4, it takes 4 times the horsepower and the energy consumption Temperature rise now is 3 degrees. 1 degree off, you're going to be moving water. You're going to be moving from the bottom to the middle of the bin. And boy, we improved a whole lot. We're not quite, we're a little bit more than half, but now it's 3 days instead of 5 days. Accomplish the same cooling change. The only thing aeration does is cool, and we accomplished that in about that much difference in time. Look here, let's go to a third. This is what we're most often being requested to deliver. This is that big air number that everybody seems to want, and it's being pushed by people that, I don't know how else to say it other than they don't know what they're doing. And there's a lot of people out there doing that. So your static pressure is 9.48 inches, and this is physics again, you can't change that. That's what the static pressure will be if you put a third of the CFM through that grain. And that's clean grain, level, not peak. So fan horsepower is now 80. Temperature rise is 8 degrees, well into the drying range. The maximum low temp drying temperature increase is 10 degrees. You should never go above that. We're almost to the maximum that you're allowed for low temp drying. And look what we did. We a little bit more than cut the cooling days in half. You use 8 times the horsepower, you move water in the middle of the bin, you gain nothing of any value. Did not save that grain, did not make that grain store longer, didn't do any of those things. I'm seeing commercial elevators come back. The young guys, what happened was the older guys, you lost your job and didn't do this right. They all stayed, things were quiet, there wasn't a lot of change going on, they went through their whole career, they learned from the old guys, but they didn't hire a lot of new guys, a lot of new guys moved on. Now we got new guys coming in that have never, they face it, from 2002 till a couple of years ago, you guys all sold all your corn before January. Didn't make any difference if you kept it, and they moved it on too. So you could cheat, you could get away with it. Remember, get away. Not necessarily make more money, but you could get away with it. I'm finding elevators doing the same thing. Now, the last time I had a talk in front of an elevator, they had 205-foot bins on fire. I'm trying to store grain at 15.5 to 16. 2 105-foot bins on fire. They didn't tell anybody about it. I'm not telling you who it was. They don't want anybody knowing about it. But that's the kind of things that can happen in these big bins if you let it go too far. So let's go up here to this 105, it's the elevator. A 20th, he also, now see why they used it, you're going to understand here a little better why they picked a 20th back in the old days. Guys weren't stupid back then. They actually knew this better than we did because it was some ways more difficult. They really didn't have the control that we have today. 1 degree temperature rise, 8.5 days to cool that entire bin with a 20th of the CFM. We can drop down here to a 10th. No one asks for a 10th anymore, they all ask for a 7. So let's go to a 7. Now we're down to 4.1 days, but we're at 8 inches of temperature rise. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. Think about this, it's 50 degrees outside and you can't get your grain below 58. You just delay, particularly down here, where it's warmer in the fall, you just delay when you can get that grain. 50 degrees is the magic point. That's where bug activity ceases, mold activity ceases. It's like putting it in a refrigerator. You're in a lot better shape than you would be otherwise. It's going to take you a lot longer. You start doing this, even this, but you start doing this, it's going to take you a lot longer to get there, and you're moving water. So that grain in the middle is not even 16 anymore. The grain in the middle is 18 and 19. So now you got a problem. Corn equilibrium point. Be proud of where you're at, or at least be happy. Because we happen to live in an area that there's where our equilibrium stay. And natural outside air will pretty much keep you between 14.8 and 15. Somewhere in that range right there. It's easy here. Down south, they can't do this. They can't even come close. Anytime you turn the aeration fan on, moisture goes up. Because they're never that low of humidity. You get a guy who wants a low temp dry. By the way, I've sold close to 1,000 low temp bins through my dealers and been involved with, so I'm not against them. You need an upstream heater to do it, you got to do it correctly. Let's take a 36.5 ring wide, 22-foot grain depth, which is the absolute maximum you should ever look at. 15 horsepower, 1750 centrifugal will get you right at that 1 CFM. Put some vents on it, static pressure is 2.93, so your temperature rise is about 1.5 to 2 degrees. We're all in great shape, we're ready to low temp dry grain. There's a whole lot of rules you got to follow to make that work. Look what putting 1 ring on just going to a 6-ring wide does. Not a 15, a 25 horse 1750 centrifugal. We still have the 1 CFM, but we're at 5.46 inches of static pressure. We're at 3 to 4 degrees temperature rise. We're at a point where there's no return. Going up just means I'm going to put all that water in on a 6-ring bin. Now, if you drive 5 rings in it, and you come back and throw some fairly dry grain on top of it, dry in, you'll probably do okay. I find that not a lot of guys have the intestinal fortitude to actually do that. The rain's coming. I want to get done. I wouldn't be very good at this either. I'd probably fill that bin. You're getting the grain off field. So what I tell people today, I didn't used to, I said, well, yeah, you can put a 6 or 7 ring up, keep it at 5 rings, dry it, put 2 more rings in. It always turns to crap. There's always black corn in the top 2 rings. I mean, not always, but the percentage is extremely high. You can't cheat it. Even a little is going to cost you. University of Minnesota has a fans. Now, it's not 100% accurate, but at least gives you an idea. You can go there, put your bin information in. It'll give you the idea where your static pressure is. Larry will sit you down anytime you want to. Jeff will sit you down anytime you want to. Any of the guys here can go through you with our system, which is, by the way, the universities use our system. There was no use of them redoing what was already done right. They couldn't pick it apart. They couldn't find a problem with it, so that's what they're using. And it'll tell you what your airflow rates are. Ours has the advantage if you download the new one. So I've been available for a couple of weeks. It'll give you an absolute minimum temperature on it. You really need to have about 20–25% because what we used was the HVAC, which was the only in writing number we had. What we actually measure on the bins is about 25% higher than that. But it'll give you some idea where your heat's going to be. We are a tested airflow. We will deliver the airflow we said so long. Holding grain above 15%. Most people think they can do it. But you should store grain no higher than 15%. Store through next fall, it should be no higher than 14%. And for a year, it's got to be 13%. And guys, this is physics. This isn't me trying to get you to buy more dryers, so I'm going to make more money and retire earlier because I'm never retiring. That's not what it is. This is physics that we're talking about. Small grains do not drop as much, but they should also drop at least a point below. The reason is that 13% there is no free water. We talked about that. Bound water is not available to anything. At 13%, you can store grain for over a year at 90 degrees. Because there's no water available for anything to come in and damage the grain. You're going to see some losses, but not what you would normally see. It becomes a magic bullet, and it's the only magic bullet I know. Grain held above 15, particularly orange bins, will see heating, loss of grade, even if the airflow is available, and that's loss of income. There's never enough air to properly dry the grain, so it loses quality. Water is only moved from the bottom to the middle of the bin. Compromised grain may blend out as the bin empties. You don't see a dot at the elevator, but there was a loss there that you didn't see. It may have been bright and yellow, and you thought things are great. 1% short on test weight. You lost 1%. This happens all the time, and you don't see it. So I love the term, I've been down for years, and I've got away with it. Yeah, you got away with it. At a cost. And the biggest cost is the risk. Once you've done that, your risk of having a catastrophic where you lose half or the whole bin goes up something like 50 times as likely. It's very small if you do it right, but it's 50 or more times more likely if you store 16%. Nothing in life is free, at least I haven't found any yet. Anytime grain heats, the heat comes from a rotting process. I love when people say that they're coming out of all heat dryer. And forgive me, Bruce, but they don't do it anymore, but first all heat drying was put it in a bin, let it steep for 12 to 24 hours, and then cool it out real fast and move it. They didn't think about why do they always have to move it. It's because you can call it steeping. I like the term rotting a whole lot better. Because anytime you leave 130-degree corn in there in 24 hours, it's going to start the rotting process. Anytime it starts, it picks up quicker the next time. But that grain heat also, that wasn't free. That comes from the consumption of dry matter. Not only is the grain compromising on test weight, but anytime grain starts out of condition, it starts getting easier. Storage life of grain is also seriously reduced. What was 450 days could real quickly become you're going to be done by June or July. Takes about 1% of the corn's value using LP gas to drive from 17% to 15% today. That's at $1 or less fuel. I had changes because it wasn't true before. It basically took about 1.5% before. 1% of test weight is more is lost than the grain is held up. There's always been that loss. In addition, risk position greatly increases. This started on the farm and spread to the commercial elevators, and it just tears me up because their risks are extraordinary. Don't choose to spend more value in test weight than you save drawing costs. Well, I did a great deal of risk to come here. And remember, this is human nature. I'm not immune from it either. Why do we go to the convenience store and pay $2 for a candy bar when we could have went to Walmart and bought it for 65 cents? Well, that's the reason they call it a convenience store. And this same thing goes across human nature. If it's easier, there's a strong pull to do it that way. You've got to look at your numbers. You've got to find out where your money's at. Now, 3 years ago, could have you done all this stuff wrong and still done well? You absolutely could. It was easy. You were getting rid of all your corn by January, February, March, so you weren't even entering in most of these losses. But today, all your margins are probably negative. You're scrambling, trying to make money. You need to be picking up all this ROI you can, and you can't afford to lose anything. You just simply can't afford to lose anything. So at this point, it becomes a lot different story than what it was before. Here, you're going to have to watch your P's and Q's if you want to be profitable. Storable days again. 80 is 450 at 13%, 69 at 15, at 14 is 47. And, or excuse me, 30 is 450. I went the wrong way. Let's say 16%, 47, 15, 69, 180. Look at your days of storage at 80 degrees. It never cooled below 80 degrees. Look at the number of days before it loses one grade at 13%. Why we did that? Everything for a reason. There is no mention of the airflow for a reason. Side issue, moisture tester, we talked about that. It probably lets you get away with things in the last few years that it wouldn't have before. How has storage changed? We've talked about this a little bit. I won't spend a lot of time in it. In the past, we used to have a significant carryover. There was always consideration. Some of the grain would carry longer, and of course, so we dried a lot of grain milling in the 90s and 80s, and particularly 70s. We dried grain down to 13 because we knew we were going to store it for a year longer. It was not uncommon, it was common. Done a lot. The carryover grain would be blended with new corn, or since the last corn used was at 13%, you could just store it a lot longer. You didn't need to worry about blending. Aeration needed to be carefully managed. Button sticks every once in a while. Aeration needed to be carefully managed and not cause any additional shrink. It takes away from the bottom line, because the margins then were small. Any of this starting to sound familiar today? Because we're getting back to where we were back then in terms of where our margins are. From early this century to 2013, a much lower level of carryover existed. And in fact, premiums, I use that term on purpose. Early in this century, I used to make fun of the old guys talking about Bot 9, Bot 8, and talking about the first of the century. It seemed like it was, we're there. We're back, we're in a new century. But level of carryover existed, and in fact, premiums were paid to bring new corn in early. The need to store grain for a year or more declined significantly. Today, prices are down, yields. We're back to where we were in the 70s, essentially. Add to the trend for farmers to attempt to store above 15%, and you've got a real mixture that is going to cause a lot more problems, and we're seeing that. It's not that it's going to happen, it's happening as we speak. Guys don't talk about losing grain. How many here, put an ad in the paper, I lost grain this year? You probably you don't tell your neighbors. Sure as hell don't tell the elevator. You're going to probe your heart. So it's not talked about, it's not carried over, but believe it or not, they call me. Because I'm kind of that invisible guy a long ways away. Now, hopefully I got something that's going to help them. I don't. But I hear it all the time, and they never tell anybody else. There's a lot more grain being lost than you realize. And the worst part of it is, there's a tremendous amount of test weight being lost on all your farms that you're not aware of. And that's something that's got to change if we're going to take and hold our margins and stay profitable. Prevention's the key. You can't do it afterwards. Like right now, I can't, I was all over the internet and the magazines last fall that this year we're going to store grain longer. You better be 14 and a half, 14. You're going to go past June 1st. That was the time, in the fall was the time to do it, you can't go back now. That decision made in the fall, you better make it then, and at least don't have all your grain at 15, 16. Because now you're locked in. Your losses are going to escalate June, July, you're locked in. At least have some dry down in 14s, so you can play a little bit with the market and you can store longer. Better yet, put a whole system together of what you do to make it so you can store grain and keep it viable. We work real hard at zero entry. We're not there yet. But the best way to make zero entry is to not allow grain to go out of condition. Do we have time? I'm saying it's going to take 10 minutes. How many here want to see the storage tips, which is basically talking about what you need to do to keep in this stuff happening? If anybody's getting tired or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and go through it. Don't feel bad if you think you need to get up and leave, or the food's calling to you or whatever. But I am going to go through it. It's up to you whether you stay or not. But I'm a little longer than what I thought. Changed this thing up a little bit. It took a little more time than what I thought it was going to. Storage tips are pretty simple. And the one thing I always tell everybody, don't listen to me. Don't listen to a manufacturer. We build equipment for everywhere in the world. We put 30% of our dryers overseas. We put a lot of our dryers in the South. We put a lot of them in Canada. We're not the best people to go to. Your local university is the best place to go to for this, for what you should be doing in terms of storage temperatures and so forth, because it does vary a lot. And there's lots of good information out there. There's a lot of good information down here. Dry the grain to safe label, again, no more than 15%. If you're going to go past May into June, 14%. If you're going to go more than a year, you need to be 13%. As the grain goes into the bin, run the aeration fans and continue until after it's full. Equalize. This is a very, very, very good tip that very few people do. Everybody gets concerned about how much electricity that fan's using. When you put grain in the bin, if you run your aeration fan, not until it's just cool the first time, but run it for 10 days. Kernels vary 10 to 15 points from kernel to kernel, and if it's an uneven field year, like we've had, they can be 30% difference kernel to kernel moisture. The more even your kernels are, the more likely to store safely. That 10 days of running, most of the time, will give you an equal base, so you're starting at least from a good position. That equalized grain just stores better than if it's not. Watch the ambient temperature using aeration fans. Get the temperature of the grain below 50 degrees as soon as possible. All your insect activity and mold activity ceases at that point. It is like putting a thing of cottage cheese in the refrigerator. It's the same thing. Remember, you guys are food grade growers. I know the trend is if you don't dry white, if you're not doing white grain, you're not food grade. Everything you grow is food grade some form. That may go to ethanol. Some ethanol does get used for foods, by the way. But that's changed things a little bit. But essentially, you're handling and storing a food product. It's not like storing gravel. It's not like storing anything else you store. It's a food grade product. You got to keep that in mind. Still okay to use a spreader for the older, smaller bins, but bins that are large, you can't throw fines more than about 5-10 feet. So even with a spreader, unless you've got the long arms, and we've never been able to make one that we felt like we should sell, because they just don't work well. It takes too much management to get them set up, and then as grain moisture varies and the density varies, it changes, and you're all the time having to get up there and adjust them, except for a few rare occasions. But for the bins larger than 48-13, you should load directly in the bin. And then every 10 to 15, pull out about 300 bushel, 400 bushel to the inverted cone. That practice has been called repetitive coring since 1931. In 15-foot bins, they did this 3 times in 1931. So it made a huge difference in how that grain stored. Had a lot of fun back then. So what you're doing, this is more than what you're probably going to do. But each time you do that, you don't have to take out very much to make a 9 or 10-foot diameter cone. But look what you did to the fines each time. You took out over half the fines that you let accumulate in the middle. You moved them somewhere else. Even if you move them to the top of another bin, they're at the top. They're somewhat spread. You're better off than you were before. Better to move them into a completely different bin and then blend them back off or whatever. But this practice is what, 30 years ago, if you were a commercial elevator and the general manager caught you not doing this, you were fired on the spot. If you didn't have your documentation that you did this, you were gone. You were history. Very big difference in how grain stored. As soon as possible after harvest, pull the bins with the peak grain So it's in an M shape, so that the middle is at least as low as the sidewall. Now you repetitively cored, so you took a lot of fines out of the middle, and now you made the two most likely, where does there move? The point of the least depth, point of least resistance. So now you've made the middle, where there's still more fines than there is at the outside, at least as likely to move air to the outside. So you've tremendously reduced the chances of heating in the center of the bin. That just makes the air move better there. Leveling at that point is also a fantastic thing to do. And very few people will do it, but you can't believe how much that benefits the bin. From this point, follow the university's aeration recommendations or website. You can leave your grain cold, bring it up to about 50 degrees when the ambient temperature reach that level. And then if you're going to market it by May, you can just leave it there, and it'll stay just fine. On a rare occasion, you may get a little on the walls, but it's not very common. That's why you bring it up to 50, by the way. In the last 5 years, we've learned. 5 years ago, that statement there wouldn't have been in there. Because we just said, if you're 35 degrees, 40 degrees, leave it there till May. We found out if you bring it up to 50, you almost eliminate that crust that gets on the side of the bin wall. So do it once. Remember to bag off the fans. The fan's an inlet. Wet, moist air goes in it and chimneys up through the bin. At the university, you'll find charts that shows this air movement. You're bringing moisture in there, causing problems in the bin. For longer storage, it's best to keep the grain relatively close to the ambient temperature, so after you go past May, you need to keep the temperature within 10 degrees of the outside temperature. Ambient. Check the grain weekly, climb the top without entering the bin to observe whether there's a crust or noticeable smell. And increased surface moisture usually is the first sign. What did Bruce always talk about at this point? You remember? He said, I don't understand you farmers. He said, you got this $2 corn, you got this 10,000 bushel bin, it's worth $20,000. For crying out loud, if I took a bucket and hung 20,000 $1 bills to the top of the bin, you'd be out there every 4 hours making sure that the rats hadn't ate it, that it hadn't got wet, that something was wrong with it. Because you put $20,000 of corn in that bin, you never go look at it. What's wrong with you? Well, forgive me, because I'm not sure I can get away with what he can get away with. But it was a true statement. Today, it's more likely a 50,000 bushel bin at $4. It's $200,000. It's worth a once a week check. Don't go in the bin, but check it. Is there anything amiss? Start the aeration fan to attempt to stop that issue, and make sure you're just trying to stop the heating issue, not the storability issue. This may work in small bins under 4813. It's not possible to get enough air to see any level of success on the larger bins. The only real fix is out of condition issues, which are not stopped, is to, and I'm going to take that statement out. I used to put that in as just trying to be conservative. I'm going to take that statement out. It's never stopped. It's never stopped. You just delayed it. You just pushed it back. This likely means the grain will have to be marketed early for grain. If you lost your control over your grain, you had to market it. And this is rarely a good thing. Once in a while it works out. They actually do the estimates. 1 year in 17, it'll work out to your advantage. The other 17, it's equal or you lost. So, prevention is always the best answer. Don't call me in February or March and think I'm going to help you, because I can't. Wish I could. I can't. Intelliair, okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but two real quick things. I kind of like these systems. They're somewhat expensive. When you look at it in the big term of the risk you're taking, they're not. They can do something we've not been able to do. Bruce McKenzie always taught us, once you start the fan, you'll never shut it off. Because if you stop a cool front in the middle of the bin, that's what those black lines. You probably always all pull grain out of the bin. In the middle, there's like this black line. What was it? That's where you stop the fan. It's going to rain today, so you stop the fan. And the two difference in temperatures drew moisture and rotted that corn. The single layer kernels rotted. So we always said don't ever shut them off. And the reason was got that. Now, these systems only run in a very narrow range of temperature and humidity. So they don't create that differential. They can go on and off and on and off, and they'll never correct those black lines. But the main thing they do is they will get that grain down below 50 degrees almost always in half the time that you can do it yourself. And they'll be doing it every day. Every hour of the day they're watching. If the outside temperature is cool enough, that grain could be cooled a little bit, they'll run it. So it's not going to cool and it shuts off. So every day it progresses towards getting that grain cooler. And you saw that chart, what kind of difference that can make. I like it. I don't think they're all that expensive when you compare what they can do for you. Dry grain, we don't make them, by the way, we don't, I've seen too much improvement that happens when guys go that way. Dry grain stores better than straight from the field. This is a statement, you tend to hear, man, I run the grain off 15 straight to me, that grain will store wonderful. It's the most likely grain to go bad that you've ever harvested. Because that grain's live. All the mold's live. All the bugs are live. The kernels are rare. Everything bad about that grain is there right there. Ran it through the dryer. Today, we don't burn test weight out. Used to, you lost 2 or 3 pounds test weight. Today, you may lose a half pound. In a lot of cases, top dries, you don't even lose that. But when you do that, it's like treating that grain, getting it ready to go in storage. Killed all the bugs, killed all the mold. And you basically had a product put in the bin that was much less likely to go bad. So the hardest grain to store, if you've got grain you put in your bin last year at 15%, watch it like a hawk. It's far more likely to go bad than grain that you dry. Don't cheat on the proper moisture level. That's a critical issue. Don't let a load slip by here. The 205s that burnt, that were on fire, both of them had 3 or 4, 16, 17% loads that went in the middle. And that's what they're pretty sure caused the issue. Get the grain down to 50 degrees as fast as possible. New aeration controllers are really good at that. Keep short-term grain cold as late as May. Manage your aeration to avoid temperature difference issues in the grain so it stores longer. Aeration controllers, the cables again do that the best. Clean level grain is easier to store. At least pull the centers down to eve level. Creating that M shape. That M shape, Billy. I want you to mold a core, but I really want you to run your aeration fans for 5 to 10 days and make that M shape. Those are 2 things you can do with very little management that'll make a significant difference in what happens in the field. Vines don't travel. Repetitive coring is the only thing that takes care of the flies. Let them build up in the middle. Elevators been doing this since the 50s. Let them build up in the middle, repetitive core. Take them out, use them for something else. Safety. I don't hardly ever end a speech, we don't talk about this. Wear your mask. I have lung damage from going into bins without a mask. You do too. Particularly Indiana. Indiana is the worst state in the United States for lung damage from both bird droppings and from also mold. And it's because we spend too much time in the grain bin. We're also one of the first states that went to grain bin, so there's a reason. It's a longer exposure. But wear that mask. It's critically important, and it makes a huge difference in what your life's going to be like when you get older. Safety should be everyone's prime concern. Use proper respiratory equipment. This applies to everyone, including you, and including you, and including you. You know, you've never been in my truck that I didn't, what do I always have? Hard hat, climbers, mask. And I wear them. Perry Maitland, you ever see him climb the ladder without climbers on? Maybe, I saw it once. It's a rare thing, particularly he's going very high. The safety issue, what's that?
Farm show.
Yeah, okay. We shouldn't do that either.
Right.
But we shouldn't. There's a bin rescue in Kentucky in the spring of 2005. That was what basically had a leak atop the bin. I'm not sure what caused it, but he had a small leak, and this was the result of it. They pulled the guy from right about there. He slid down past this mountain. That's about where he was. That's why they put the rope there. Where did that thing slip through? Yeah, there we go. This thing is just changing on its own sometimes. Did I get through all of those? Not technically. Virtually all bin entrapments occur because someone entered the bin. You never hear of an entrapment there wasn't bad grain. Never. So what's the best way to keep you or your loved ones from being trapped? Keep your grain in good shape. It's the only way, really. It always occurs because proper storage practices. What caused the grain? You didn't follow the practices, you didn't do the management. This is that same bin. There was a loss. In a lot of cases, this case, they actually saved the guy. So this is one of the good stories. That's where they found him. In a system, not necessarily like this one, but a system like this one, we manufacturers basically sell all our cost, and we've given away several hundred to fire departments and so forth over the years and processes, because this is the quickest way to get someone out if they do get entrapped without further. Key things, if a guy's entrapped in the bin, turn the aeration fan on. Water stagnation or air stagnation. You know, if you go into this position, you're never going to be trapped. You go in this position, you can live up to 4, 5, 6 hours down there. You can actually live, but you got to cover your face, keep the grain from getting inside your mouth and nose. Turn on the aeration fan because that air will quickly become CO2 filled and you'll suffocate. If the aeration fan's going, it's a small one, works just as well as a big one. That refreshes the air, allows you to continue to breathe. Get the person out of the system as fast as you can. If it's above the ground, if he's above, this is the way. If he's not above, then about the only, this guy was not above. That's about the only way you can do it. Cut these holes higher, because very quickly the positive can get the green away. So cut them a little higher. Most of the fire departments are now learning how to do this. And it's better to not cut a square, cut a V. And pry the bottom of the V open. It puts less stress on the bin, and it's less likely to cause the bin to have a failure or cause problems that way. It's all going to be repaired afterwards. Hopefully you save the guy, and all you gotta do is do a little bit of repairs on a couple of sheets, and you're in good shape. But never a good thing when someone's entrapped, at all. So thank you for coming. Hope you learned something. I'll be here until you guys leave, so if you have any other questions, feel free to come up.